that serves our purpose.
That's interesting. Actually, just yesterday there was a report from LinkedIn that talked about, there'd been some survey of L&D teams, and I'm not going to remember the specifics off the top of my head, but generally this is a trend that they sort of identified across a whole number of L&D teams, that the sense of impact that L&D can have in the business has been really sharpened through all this, through the pandemic and all the changes. Do you say that because of the skill, because people already had the skills to be able to work remotely, or can you give me a little bit more on that? Why things have changed with the pandemic? Why you feel more connected?
Mm-hmm. I don't know necessarily that it has been as a result of the pandemic, as much as it has been, the last several years of unprecedented change
Got it.
and, the pace of disruption and change and the advancements in technologies and the new skills that
Got it.
employees need to stay relevant. And if our workforce does not have the skills that the organization needs, right, then then the employability, of that workforce is in jeopardy.
Got it.
And so, if we can keep those skills relevant, whether they continue their career with Cargill or they continue their career somewhere else, but those skills are skills that employees need and can put to work, and they can earn an income, then that helps keep all economies thriving.
Got it. Got it. Understood. So let's talk a little bit about what you've done in terms of transforming the learning function. So we sort of set the scene of these amazing forces at work on Cargill as a business and the criticality of building skills for the future. I know you made the sort of digital transformation of learning a core component of your strategy. Can you give me some context? Can you give me a sort of rationale why you focus so heavily on the digital side of things?
Well, I think for us, we really had to pay attention to what our businesses were struggling with. And so I know many of us here are businesses communicating the challenges and the pressures that they have,
Mm.
in executing their strategies. So things like we don't have the skills that we currently need to execute our strategies. Where do we get those skills? We can't find them in the market. They're too expensive. It takes too long to reskill our incumbent workforce. These are all things that all of us, hear from our businesses, and we too have heard that in Cargill. And so, listening to that, they weren't telling us, "Hey, we need this new program or that new program or this competency build or that competency build." What they were actually saying and how we in Cargill L&D translated that is we need to be more responsive. We need to address the skill needs of the workforce faster. We need to be able to do it at scale. It has to be accessible on any device that our employees are using. Of course, it has to be efficient from a cost standpoint. It needs to be effective and aligned to business objectives. And of course, if we're going to use digital, it has to be engaging because we have to keep them coming back for the learning. And so when we hear those challenges and pressures from our business that I mentioned, we translate it into here's what they're actually saying. And it wasn't asking for a specific program. It was basically telling us we have to do learning differently. And that's what led us to digital and the digital transformation.
Got it. Got it. And then in conversations before that you and I have had, Julie, one of the really interesting things, intriguing things for me about how you went about that was you developed a really strong relationship with your IT world. I mean, not just in terms of a partnership, but actually kind of stealing, if I can use that term, ideas and concepts from them, which you sort of put to work in your own transformation. How critical was it for you to develop that strong relationship with your IT team?
It was very critical. At the end of the day, we had to be in it together to figure out what did this modern learning architecture look like? What were the capabilities we needed, and how would we go about building these capabilities using technology? And we needed from a learning standpoint, we needed to have that vision for what we were trying to accomplish. And from an IT standpoint, they needed to bring that technical knowledge to the table. And so, from the very beginning, when we were initially conceiving our new vision and our strategic focus areas, we had IT at the table as partners, contributing to shaping this new vision and strategy, so that when we got to the place where we had to actually sit down and blueprint out this new technology architecture, they already understood what we were trying to accomplish. We weren't debating on which technology was the right one.
Hmm.
We were talking about what was the right architecture to enable us to build these digital learning capabilities we needed to build, and do it in a way that was flexible and agile enough because of how fast the market is changing and how fast technology advancements are happening. We needed an architecture that was flexible enough that we never again got locked into one system, and couldn't evolve with how the technology was advancing.
I think beyond just the architecture piece, the sort of the systems architecture setup, you also took some sort of operational practices from your IT team as well, or from the
Mhm.
IT world at least. You and I have talked about how you started to move towards an agile development methodology, and you looked at sort of DevOps as an approach to building learning. How did those play out? How did those approaches help you operate differently?
Mhm. Well, from an agile standpoint, I think a lot of people think about agile just in terms of technology. And, if I refer back to the earlier points in our conversation around the pressures the business was feeling and that need for speed,
Mm,
so to speak, um, adopting some of the agile principle values and tools in learning and how we design, develop, and deliver learning actually enabled us to get our minimum viable products out into the hands of the learners faster. And if we could get the learning into the hands of the learners faster with the expectation that, hey, um, this is good enough, it's not perfect, but help us, give us feedback on what do you find of value and what do you not find of value, so that we could pull out the waste and continue to create more valuable learning experiences. And so that approach, and then in how our relationship with our learners and getting them involved in our iterative design and development process, actually helped us, decrease our, well, I guess, speed up our responsiveness times, and helped us get learning into the hands of the learners as fast as possible. We did away with those long design development, then pilot, and then make refinements, and that was taking us 6 to 8 months from the point at which the learning need was identified. And so it helped us just abandon all of that and just try some new practices out that actually helped us address some of these speed issues. And the other benefit that came from that is, as fast as the external environment is changing and as fast as things are changing inside of Cargill to respond to that environment, um, it enabled an iterative design development process so that our learning content and our learning designs, um, never became obsolete. If you think of the old way that we would do things, we design develop once and then deliver it unchanged for however many years.
hmm
Well, now we're constantly adapting the learning. We're constantly incorporating whatever's going on in the business context into the learning experience. We're changing things, within the design. And, technology is enabling us to do that. But agile is actually the mindset, and the approach that has enabled us to just completely change the way that we design and develop our learning
It's a
solutions.
constant experimentation and tweaking and changing your programs based on signals and feedback from people going through.
It
I want,
is. We're not constantly changing everything. We do have our core learning designs, regardless of whatever capability we're talking about, but we have left enough of the design um, adaptable to where we can continue to update it and refine it as needed without a lot of money, without a lot of investment or time.
one thing that you mentioned before and would totally agree on is the explosion of learning related technology in the world over the last few years. I mean, either built for purpose or technologies that could be applied to the learning process.
Hmm.
You'd mentioned in our conversation that you borrowed another practice from your I team, and that was this innovation lab that you've put together. Can you describe your innovation lab for me?
Absolutely. And I can't claim that I personally put it together.
Hmm.
Um, this is where being able to hire and bring in great talent who
Yeah.
has this experience. And we were able to bring someone into the learning and development team who was formerly with an area of global IT called Digital Labs, which is that's all they do is innovation and work with the businesses to identify new and different applications of new to market technologies.
Mm.
And so they had this innovation process and framework within Digital Labs, and that's just the way that they worked. And so as this individual joined our team, one of the first things that she was charged with was to figure out how do we bring in some of that practice and process into learning and development. What do we need to adapt so it works within learning and development, so that we had our own innovation process and framework within learning and development?
Got it. Sometimes, though, that can be when you set up a separate innovation group. I've had this experience myself. It can sort of
Hmm.
backfire a little bit, and sometimes everybody else in the team is feels excluded from the innovation process, or somehow their work is a little less valuable. Um, did that happen at all to you? How did you guard against that?
Hmm. We from day one, we have made innovation a whole L&D responsibility. So we've
Mm.
never set it up as a separate lab or a separate team with a separate group of employees. So that
Mhm.
I think was kind of um, priority number one, that made sure that it was a pervasive capability that we were all responsible for. Um, I also made sure, gosh, starting 2 years ago, we started this, that each one of my leadership team members had at least one innovation goal on, their goal plan for that year. So we hardwired it in, a
Mhm.
bit. We also, as I mentioned, we adapted an innovation process and framework for L&D, and we created an innovation advisor rotational role. So it wasn't a separate full-time position that someone was hired to do. It's a rotational role that we use for talent within the L&D team to spend 1 year playing that innovation advisor. And they are responsible for managing the process and the framework that we use within learning and development. And so the overall goal has always been to upskill the team on innovation strategy, methodologies, and tools, while
Mm.
also filling our own product development pipeline. And
Okay.
so all of our L&D team members can scout topics, they can experiment with new thinking, they can test hypothesis. It really is a whole team responsibility.
Got it. And then give me a sense of how it works. How does something go into the innovation pipeline? How do you pick a
Hmm.
technology to give the treatment?
Hmm. So anyone can pitch an idea. All they have to do is we have what we call an innovation canvas. And so They fill out the innovation canvas. They meet with the innovation advisor.